to be continued. You will remember that I announced that number 8 in the series would be our last set of reflections. But last time also we found it necessary to produce something like an index, going back over the titles of the different series and a symbol that had been used in each one, and the main question to go that we'd had for each month. And we're going to do this again now. First of all, there is the reminder that these are a series of reflections, not of conferences. The aim is not to expand our intellectual knowledge, but to stimulate and sustain and support and nourish our inner journey, growth of our spiritual selves on the journey through space-time. And so the most important thing is that we take time to go over what we have heard, both in the series and within ourselves, the word of the Spirit whispering within us, to reflect, to look again, to understand more clearly, and to gather strength and energy and go on. And so now let's see what has been happening during these last 8 months. I'm not going to give you the answers this time. I'm simply going to go through the titles, or some of the titles we gave to the different reflections, and ask you, when I give you the title, see if you can immediately connect it with either an image that was used, or a question that you carried away with you, or another thought that came to you under that heading. So here we are. Number 1. To arrive where I started from. We considered the difference between a journey that we see as linear, with a beginning and an end and a path, even with a few bumps in between, and a cyclic journey, where you start, you move forward, and you seem to come back to the beginning, but not quite. Something has moved, something sends you off again. So have a look, whatever detailed insights you have. It was important in the cyclic journey that you don't have an achievement plan, no fixed goals, that you relax, but you move in confidence. So, what is already connecting in your mind about the reflection on to arrive where I started from? Number 2, the title, The DNA Revolution and Me, raised all sorts of radical questions. Many revolutions going on, and the revolution, the DNA revolution, a new human being. We mentioned different ways in which our humanity, the structure of our physical humanness, could be changed. We mentioned our work with the genome, how we hope to detect and cut out those parts of a genetic inheritance which carried certain diseases, certain handicaps. We called CRISPR-Cas9 for the technology. 3 people involved in the DNA production, conception, and so on and so on. The enormous power, potential, but also the possible negative consequences. and my response to them. Is something coming back already in your memory? If not, this is very important. We need people to reflect deeply on these advances in research into the structure of a human being. Number 3, crossing the threshold from the dialogue of ideas to the dialogue of experience. A basic attitude change towards a global family. Perhaps you remember, if you remember nothing else of this reflection, you remember the story of Sheila and how she bought her first Muslim potatoes and how eventually ended up in the home of the Muslim shopkeeper, trying to console him in his sadness at the violence around them. So go a little further than the Muslim potatoes and see what crossing the threshold demands of you at this moment. Number 4, Irenaeus, go beyond mind to all that lies beyond mind. And this led us into the instinct for migration that is in all human beings, and how from the beginning of our arrival, development as a species with self-reflective consciousness, we've always been ready and willing to get up and move to another environment, one that offered us more food, more shelter, more opportunity, or even just more adventure. And so we also are willing to get up and change, to go beyond mind. We looked a little towards artificial intelligence and ourselves in a robotic era. Remember any of this? Go back and see which question you carried away with you from that reflection, and what answers and what further questions arose from your own reflection. And number 6. I had 2 things on the table in front of me, a cell phone and an iPad, and reminded you that no matter how familiar and useful or frustrating those pieces of equipment might be, they could also be weapons of mass destruction. And we talked about media addiction, fear and respect. This was a very hot topic for reflection. If you sitting and watching this video at the moment have a cell phone in your pocket and an iPad on the desk, are they really being used for a potential for good and creativity and fullness of life? Or are you becoming a slave to them? It's a very simple question. It has far-reaching answers for all of us. And so, violence. Oh, we know a lot about violence. Violence and the art of healing. Original wisdom, martial arts. Do you remember the question you took from this reflection? Violence within yourself, violence around you, and how to bring healing, not just protection, self-defense, but healing to yourself, your own anger and potential violence, and to the aggressor, and so on. Light and darkness. And we looked at that lovely phrase from the song, there isn't crack in everything, but that's how light gets in. And we looked at some of the cracks in the darkness of our social crisis today in the world. We looked at some of the cracks through which light can come. Cracks in our fear, our violence, our disrespect, through which peace can come back to us, a desire for harmony. Now, not a daydream, but a practical, challenging reality. And that brings us to the last one we've just recorded. No beginning, no end, only now. The purpose of the series lies in our reflection. The power of the series lies in my personal reflection. And the questions it arises in me, and the answers I begin to explore and to develop, that change my life and therefore help others to change theirs. Now, my suggestion would be that from this first quick run through the topics and the questions, you choose the one that you remember least, or the one you may have missed completely, and go back and find it. Look at it again. Fill in the blanks, the image, the questions, the answers you discovered. Then do that for all of them. You have plenty of time to do this now, because we have a break between the last in this series and the beginning of the new series in a few months' time. And if you do this, the rhythm of reflecting and questioning and answering will continue, and it needs to continue. It will continue, and by the end of the next 3 months, you'll be ready to begin the series all over again, under a new title, but still looking deeply inside to that, penetrate to the depth of your own self, where change happens for you and for all those around you, all members of our human family. Jesus, who was called the Christ, once said to his disciples, we can almost hear a slight weariness or frustration in his voice as he said it, "Now that you know these things, you will be happy if you do them." This is how that he felt at one point in his teaching to his disciples. And I think it's a good reminder for us when we realize we've had now several months of reflection, and it's taken us into a more serious attitude towards the spiritual journey, the innermost life, the self, the hidden self that needs to grow strong. Now, I mentioned at the beginning of the 8th in the series that the word now, written on the board with water, but on a special board, was part of the Zen Buddhist tradition, as a familiar practice in that tradition, for the very obvious reason to constantly remind us we cannot hold on even to the beginning of a word when we're writing it. That second, that millisecond has gone. There is only now. Now, finding Zen boards for you to practice on may not be easy, but it's not the only way of doing it. What you do need to do is give yourself time to practice. You can be, if you take public transport to work, for example, to or from work, you can give yourself a few minutes, instead of reading the newspaper, just looking out of the window, or closing your eyes so that the people around you think you're sleeping after a bad night or something. And if you have a ring on your finger, just slowly turning it round. Just slowly turning the ring round on your finger. Telling yourself, now. This moment. Only now. Just choose a word. Come back to the present moment. You can do it by a simple gesture, if I say, turning a ring on your finger, turning a coin over in your pocket. If you're sitting somewhere alone, it's much easier. You can take out a mala, a string of beads, and do it with that, reminding yourself. Or you may prefer to sit or stand by a window at a favourite spot near a tree and just look and not talk. Just listen to silence beyond sound. Listen to the silence beyond the sound. Close your eyes and listen to the silence within yourself. In this moment, no before or after, no yesterday, not tomorrow, just in this moment. There are endless ways you can discover. You could be really creative. Find your own place, your own method, your own reminder. It takes a few minutes and nothing more. And realize this moment, a drop of water falling into the ocean. Drop of water, and now it is the ocean. And you can't get it back. The moment has gone. So, we're going to just show you now again the word now written as a spiritual practice on a Zen board. You may be lucky to buy one, but it doesn't matter if you can't. You can find your own way of remembering the moment. I advise you, though, not to use a clock. A ticking clock will, over years of experience, remind you of something else. Your need to get on and do something, because time is passing. Time isn't passing, time is now. Finished. Now. Finished. So, just watch the Zen practice of writing this moment and then invent your own. See you at the next reflection.